I'm going to talk about supporting maternal mental health today. And I'm going to talk about that from the perspective of um, a couple of different hats that I wear. So I'm going to talk about that from the peer perspective of a mother myself. I'm going to talk about that from the perspective of a postpartum doula who supports mothers, parents, families in their transition from birth to mothering. And I'm going to talk about it also from the perspective of someone who has worked in the mental health field for going on 10 years now. So, combining all of those different perspectives, we're going to talk about supporting maternal mental health. And for some of you who work very closely with moms, and that is the focus of what you do, some of this might be a repeat, but I really, really love to discuss things from a holistic perspective and look at things through the lens of the nervous system and nervous system states. And so hopefully some of you will enjoy that and maybe find that interesting. So throughout this, I am going to kind of sprinkle in some experiences and absolutely everything is an invitation, which means that it is not required in any kind of way. If it doesn't feel good to you, you don't have to do it. And I encourage you to do something else that would feel good to you. So, and if it feels more comfortable to turn your camera off for those brief little experiences, you're more than welcome to do that. Um, and yeah, it's really just an invitation to kind of start from a place of being a little more grounded or embodied as we enter into this, and then to kind of think about how we could use some of these to support some of these kinds of tools or techniques to support the individuals that we work with. So we are going to start with one of those little experiences. It's not going to require you to get up and move or do anything crazy. It can be done from exactly where you are. But again, if you'd like to turn your camera off, please feel free to go ahead and do that. So if we're going to be kind of focusing on what's happening internally. And so if it helps you to go inside, like if it helps you to close your eyes, if it makes it easier to go inside by having your eyes closed, please feel free to do that. And if you feel like that makes you just want to fall asleep, because I don't know about where you are, but it's like kind of a rainy morning here. So if you feel like closing your eyes is just going to put you out, then please feel free to keep them open. Just find something that is, maybe somewhat pleasant to look at. So beginning to draw your attention inward and just noticing how you are arriving to this meeting space today. You might start by doing a scan either from the head down towards the toes or from the toes up to the head. And just checking in space by space within yourself to notice maybe some things that you didn't notice in the midst of checking emails this morning, rushing to get to the office or to your workspace at home, amidst your thoughts about how your morning went, how last night was, whatever's waiting for you after this. See if you can allow yourself to get beneath all of those things and just witness again how you're arriving. Become curious about what you find, noticing temperature, pressure, pain, tightness, openness, neutrality. Noticing any feeling type states that are present and what it is within your internal bodily experience that lets you know that you feel that way. So, for example, if I'm feeling anxious this morning, I might know that because there's a kind of quickening in my chest or a gripping in my jaw or my hands. So just continuing to become curious, scanning the body, noticing everything that is present. And if you're feeling sluggish, tired, low energy this morning, then I'll encourage you to just put your feet on the ground and press gently into your feet, feeling firmly into your connection to the floor or whatever surface is beneath you. And then do the same with your connection to the surface below your sits bones. So pressing a little more firmly down into your seat, maybe growing a couple of inches taller. And just inviting energy to start to travel up and down the spine as you hold yourself up a little bit more strongly, not with tension or gripping, but just with a little more activation. Now, if you're feeling the opposite, where you're feeling a little over energized, like you've had too much coffee, or you're feeling a little anxious, unable to sit still, maybe you're like, I really don't have time for this meeting today because I have a million things to do, whatever it is that's driving all of that. If you're feeling that way, where the energy is a little more on the high end, I'll encourage you to try to soften the shoulders, soften the jaw. Allow yourself to maybe rest into the support of the chair behind you and just really feel into that. Noticing anything else that comes up as it comes, and releasing to the best of your ability, releasing any judgment around what comes. And then when it feels right, you can slowly start to blink your eyes open, but looking away from the screen at first. Letting your eyes relax. When we look at the screen, our eyes tend to get a little bit wider, a little bit drier. Just let your eyes relax into the sockets as you just look off into a different area of your space. You might turn your head from side to side, orienting to the space that you're in, helping to ground you a little more fully into the here and now moment. And then when you're ready, it feels right, you can bring your eyes back to the screen. You can turn your camera back on if that feels okay. Thank you to everyone who went through that with me. And my offering to you is to, while you're listening to me throughout this, just kind of continue to come back into yourself. It's really, really easy, especially in the work that we all do, to kind of get drawn outside of ourselves and get pulled into more of this relational aspect of whatever it is that's happening between us and whoever it is that we're working with. And so having the ability to remain grounded within yourself, even by just being able to come back like, oh, yeah, I can feel my feet on the floor. Or, yeah, I can feel the chair supporting my spine, is really empowering to help to keep us more grounded and embodied within ourselves. And we can be a much better resource for others when we are grounded in ourselves. So, my offering or invitation to you is that as I'm talking, just every now and then check back in with what's happening inside you. All right. So this is about me, and Sheila read a lovely introduction. So thank you for that. Just a little bit more about myself. As I mentioned, I'm a mom. I have two young kids that keep me very happy and also very tired. I am a postpartum doula. I started my business in 2020. Inspired really truly by my own pregnancy, birth, and postpartum experiences. And I felt like I wanted to be able to support mothers in ways that I hadn't received. A lot of it was just because I didn't have the knowledge of what kind of supports were available. Um, so I went from being someone working at the intersection of mental health and holistic healing to someone, working in the birth world. And so now I like to kind of dip my toes back and forth here and there into all of them, and I get to wear all these different hats and do the different things that I love, which is really beautiful. So yeah, I started my business in 2020 to support families here doing in-home work, supporting them through the transition, um, the postpartum transition. And in addition, I am someone who does a lot of work supporting mental health professionals, supporting trauma survivors, um, utilizing holistic tools like Reiki and like somatic work. Um, and yeah, so again, I'll kind of pull from all of my different experiences as we go throughout this conversation today. So, this is a little bit about what we're going to be looking at today. The intention of this conversation is really to look at maternal mental health from all the way from pregnancy through, the lifespan. So, we will be looking at the perinatal period specifically, and then we'll be looking more broadly at parenthood and mental health and how it all comes in. Um, so we'll talk about specific challenges that present perinatally, and then again during parenting, look at the barriers and potential solutions in terms of providing support, and we'll look at some resources, which likely many of you are already very aware of. And then again, we'll talk a little bit more about things from the nervous system perspective and get to have another experience towards the end. So, my goal again with this conversation is to look at from birth all the way through parenting and to look at this from a couple different angles. So talking about what do we, how do we best support a mom who is just coming into motherhood who has a trauma history, somebody who's coming in with a kind of pre-existing set of conditions or circumstances. And then how do we also just protect parents who are dealing with the day in and day out stressors of parenting? And how do we protect their mental health as they're going through that? So, just like any other population, whether it's supporting veterans or whether it's supporting the LGBTQIA population, it is really important that we provide customized support to that really fits and best suits the population that we're working with. So the same is true for supporting mothers. And now I'm talking about maternal mental health today, but I just want to put this out there that a lot of the research and things that are referenced here do specifically speak to moms because there is a lack of good research available on individuals who are who have gone through the birth process and do not identify as female. So some of the research, yes, will be very specific to moms, to women. And I want to just say this from the start that I support all birthing people, all parents, and that this, the tools and the ways of supporting this population really extend to all parents, all individuals, no matter how they identify. So I want to just start off by getting your wheels turning a little bit around like what are some of the challenges that are very specific to moms? What are the things that come to mind when you think about what are the obstacles, the challenges that they are facing that are unique to this population as opposed to supporting a non-parent? And you can just drop things in the chat as they come. This can be, again, related to the perinatal period, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, or this could be specific to parents who have kids who are, teenagers. It really doesn't matter. Sleep deprivation. Yes, 100%. Sleep deprivation is hugely impactful on our mental health. Thank you for that, Nicole. Being a working mom, balancing roles, feeling isolated, lack of support, basic needs. Yes, absolutely. All of this. Housing. Yeah. So becoming a parent, the ability to be honest with their providers, 100%. Potential legal repercussions. We're going to talk about that. Being expected to do it all. Yeah. Societal expectations, personalized pressure that we put on ourselves, healthy relationships. Yeah. Relationship dynamics change in response. Our relationship to ourselves change in response to going through this transition into parenting, parent role, and motherhood. Hormonal changes 100%. Not feeling like yourself. Yes. Thank you. Having to juggle many roles. Judgment. Yeah. Thank you guys. These are all great. Um, so we are going to look at, more of these in terms of categorizing them. Not that we need to, but remaining patient. Yes, that is my daily challenge as a mom. Thank you for that one. So we're going to categorize these a little bit just to help us kind of think about all of the different factors that are impacting parents. So first, as I talked about a little bit before, pre-existing conditions and or circumstances. So if you're coming into the role of parent and you already have a really difficult relationship with your own parents, that's going to impact how you show up. If you have any kind of physical or mental health challenges that are, again, pre-existing, that is going to affect your ability to parent. If you are struggling with substance use issues, trauma, gender identity, these are all going to impact your experience of, if you're somebody who does not identify as female and you are going through the maternal health care system and not being respected for your identity, then of course that's going to have an impact on your mental health. If you are a Black mother in the world today, unfortunately, the maternal mortality rates, the disparities are just absolutely just unacceptable. And so being, just understanding the risks and the challenges, of course, that's going to have an impact on your mental health. So these are all things that are going to be, things that we carry, identities, aspects of ourselves that we bring into the experience of motherhood that are potentially going to make it harder for us and increase our likelihood of struggling mentally and emotionally in some kind of way. Now, circumstantial will be the things that are happening just specifically during this time, right? So sleep deprivation, like we've talked about, feeding challenges for anyone who has had, experiences with breast or chest feeding. It is not as easy or as natural as it is often made out to be and can be a really, really big source of stress. So the stress of increased responsibilities, if you are on medications during your pregnancy that you have to change because they're not safe for the baby, medication changes, same thing with nursing, that can obviously have an impact. If you've received medications during birth, the experience of withdrawing from those medications, like for example, for someone who receives opioids or any other kind of pain medication during a C-section, for example. There's going to be an impact of the withdrawal of that substance leaving your body after birth and as you're recovering. So changes in relationship dynamics, we talked about, someone said relationships in the chat, the kind of change in identity, lack of support. There's just this idea that, we are all supposed to do this 100% on our own and be entirely self-sufficient in raising a family. And that was really never the way it was intended. It was always intended that we have the support of a village, and that village is gone for most of us in this modern day world of being a mother, being a parent, and raising kids. So if you had to experience any kind of pregnancy complication, loss for either mother or baby, obviously this is going to have an impact. And then the physiological changes that are taking place during this time, hormonal changes, changes in body and how that impacts body image. And then the brain is going through a lot of changes during the period of pregnancy and birth and postpartum. And so it's changing in positive ways to improve our capacity to handle stress. And the brain will forever be changed as a result. And so that's really beautiful from like this neuroplasticity standpoint, showing us that there's capacity for growth and, to really handle the increased stress of motherhood. And that's not an instant process. And it doesn't mean that it's ever easy, right? So that while all of these changes are going on, there's still this struggle for all of us to kind of rise to the occasion of the new set of demands on us and the challenges and the responsibility. So I love this graph as it just really just depicts it so beautifully. I wanted to make it nice big so everybody could see it. So this is an image that shows the hormonal shifts that happens over the course of 40 weeks of pregnancy. Now, not every pregnancy happens in 40 weeks, but this just shows the rise and the fall of hormones throughout the experience. So as you can see, at 40 weeks, there is a drastic decline in multiple hormonal levels. And then there's a continuation of kind of a rise and a fall that continues for anyone who chooses to breast or chest feed. So for many, the drastic drop in hormone levels that occurs at 40 weeks just following delivery is hugely, hugely impactful on mental health, and something that is, I think, just really helpful to be aware of, as it's not something that needs to be, labeled or stigmatized in any kind of way, but just really more support is needed. It shouldn't be expected for us to be able to, really navigate that with ease, because that's a big shift. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the most common mental health diagnoses. And we're not going to go into detail about what each of these are, but just it's more so for a starting place as we kind of look at all of the challenges that that mothers are facing first here in this perinatal period. So the baby blues is not a diagnosis. Baby blues is this kind of common term that's just given to folks who experience some kind of sadness following birth. And looking at that hormonal shift, that's most people, 60 to 80% of new mothers. Now, if that continues on beyond that first 2 weeks, then it becomes something that is usually diagnosed. So antenatal, another word for prenatal depression or anxiety, occurs in 15 to 21% of pregnant women. Postpartum depression, 21% of women, 60% of low-income women and teens. So that's just an absolutely huge number. Now, I think that for most folks who think of postpartum, they think of postpartum depression. And while it's good to have awareness around that, certainly, I think there's just this kind of, it almost overshadows in some kind of way somewhat all of the other potential challenges that a lot of people face and don't necessarily recognize or don't receive support around, because postpartum depression is kind of that larger thing that is being screened for. There's not a lot of screening that's happening for prenatal depression, for example, but lots of screening that is very standard for postpartum depression. Perinatal panic disorder occurs in 11% of new mothers. Perinatal OCD in 11% of new mothers. Perinatal bipolar disorder, 22% of cases of postpartum depression are actually bipolar depression. And then postpartum PTSD, so PTSD that is specifically related to the pregnancy, birth, or postpartum process, occurs in 9% of women. Postpartum psychosis occurs in 1 to 2 of every 1,000 deliveries. So postpartum psychosis, I know, here in the Northeast anyways, there was a family that was impacted by this in Massachusetts, a story that made a lot of headlines this past year, and a lot of really difficult conversations that were happening on the internet and things like that in connection to this, and a lot of just misunderstanding. Paternal mood disorders. So 10% of new dads will experience some kind of mood disorder that is related to the changes that they're going through in terms of their life and coming into that role of parent. And then finally, one that's really kind of lesser known or less, less understood is dysphoric milk ejection reflex. So that's not necessarily diagnosable um, a diagnosis that you'll see. It's more so a condition where for breast or chest feeding individuals, every time that there is a letdown or when the milk ejection reflex occurs, it's accompanied by very uncomfortable or very kind of dark feelings. So it could be feelings of like loathing towards your baby. It could be feelings of just intense anxiety. So things that only come um, in accompanying this kind of natural reflex that's happening. And so that can be something that a lot of people don't necessarily identify or aren't aware of. And so it just becomes, okay, well, there's something I really don't like about breastfeeding. So I'm going to be done with it, which obviously it's a fine choice to make in that situation, but more understanding or awareness around that is helpful. So beyond postpartum, we're looking just at parents. 1 in 5 US adults identifies as having a mental health challenge or did in 2019. 15.5 million US parents had a mental health challenge in the last year when that study was done between 2008 and 2014. In 2021, 1 in 4 US children had a caregiver with poor mental health. In 2017, 15 to 23% of children worldwide were living with a parent with mental health challenge. Children of parents who experience mental health and or addiction challenges are at a higher risk for developing a mental health challenge themselves. So for many of us, we're not in the position where we are supporting children directly, but when we think about intergenerational trauma and just the impacts that all of this has, as this kind of trickle down effect, when we are supporting mothers in finding better mental health or fathers in finding better mental health, we are supporting the next generation and having better mental health too. So none of this is going to be a surprise to any of you, but just these are the things that are impacting parents. So when we don't think about anyone who's coming into this with any kind of, challenges of their own, right? Say they don't have any kind of trauma in their background, any substance use issues, anything like that, there's still, in my opinion, the cards are really stacked against families in a lot of ways. There's this really impossible juggling act that goes on trying to balance all of the things. And in our economy today, it's just impossible for most families to keep up or to make ends meet. So these are just some of the factors, knowing that there's many, many more that are impacting parents every single day, never mind all of the other circumstances that they might have walked into the role of parent with. So I want to talk a little bit again about the nervous system and the window of tolerance. So hopefully this is something that some of you are familiar with, but for anyone who's not, the window of tolerance is a theory that's used to describe our capacity for regulation. So this applies to anyone, but I'm going to talk about how this applies more specifically to parents after I kind of break it down a little bit more. So the window of tolerance, again, it's our capacity for regulation. That band that's in the middle is this optimal arousal zone. So what does that mean? That means that when we experience stress, our ability to kind of rise and fall with the ebbs and flows, the challenges, the joys and the challenges of life, when we are able to do that, we are in this optimal arousal zone. So, for example, I am kind of riding the waves of life. Yes, it doesn't mean that I'm peaceful all the time. It doesn't mean that I am joyous all the time. It doesn't mean that life is perfect all the time. What it means is that I have a flexible nervous system that's able to respond to whatever it is that's happening around me. So, my kids are pushing my buttons and I am able to roll with it and be creative and find ways to, revert their attention elsewhere and give myself a break. Someone cuts me off in traffic and I'm on my way to work, and I'm like, oh man, that was stressful. And I can recognize that I'm okay and I can go about the rest of my time. Now, if I am someone who doesn't have a whole lot of experience with regulation, and I'll talk about why that would be, then if somebody cuts me off on the road, I might, instead of just being like, oh, that was annoying, or I didn't enjoy that so much, when someone cuts me off, I might then shoot into a state of rage and feel like, there's just a ton of expletives floating out of my mouth, or feel like I need to go chase this person down. Um, that means that I have exited the window of tolerance and I have shot up into that top area where you see the red, into a high arousal zone. So when there's hyper arousal, we're shifting into the sympathetic nervous system state. And it means there's an excess of energy in the system. So my body becomes flooded with energy as I feel like, oh man, like my fists are clenched, my, jaw is tight, and, my foot is like pressing against the gas pedal as I feel myself, almost without control or without, conscious choice. I feel like I am just off and running towards this person that cut me off in traffic, because I am just so flooded with these stress hormones. So the opposite can be true with experiences of, say, grief or sadness or disassociation. So, for example, if I am, if I lose my job, I could be, if I'm someone who has a good amount of regulation, I might be able to experience that stress and bounce back relatively quickly. It doesn't mean I'm not going to feel bummed or sad or mad or whatever emotions that come. But what it means is that I'm going to feel those and know that those feelings aren't going to last, and I'm going to be able to return back to baseline when I'm ready. Now, for someone else who maybe doesn't have such an adaptive or resilient nervous system, I might then drop into a state of deep depression. I might feel hopeless. I might feel lost. I might feel like nothing is ever going to be okay again. And in that case, I would be dropping down into the blue zone, which is that bottom portion there, which is low arousal, hypoarousal. So there's too little energy in my system. So that's moving down into the parasympathetic nervous system, more specifically the dorsal branch of the parasympathetic nervous system. So we all have capacity for regulation. And the size of our window, in terms of like how much space do we actually have to kind of ride this wave of up and down before we shoot up or shoot down into those areas where we don't necessarily want to stay. The size of our window is determined by multiple factors. It's determined by our experiences. So people who have experienced trauma have a shorter or a smaller window of tolerance. And for individuals who did not receive care or nurturing or safe attachment or co-regulation growing up, they typically have a smaller window of tolerance. For anyone who is in having an experience that maybe isn't like traumatic stress, but it might be chronic stress in the form of sleep deprivation, would be a really great example, where it's just like little, incidences over and over and over again, where you just kind of start to get depleted and don't even really realize that it's happening. Or burnout is another great example. Then in those instances, again, our capacity for regulation becomes smaller. So if we look at this image here, this shows what it looks like when we have experienced trauma. So this big lightning bolt on the left-hand side shows a traumatic event coming in and changing or disrupting our response system. And again, it might not be one big traumatic event. It could also be like smaller kind of lightning bolts over time. So when you have experienced trauma, naturally, your nervous system is going to shift and change in response to that. And one of the impacts is that instead of being able to ride this nice fluid wave where we're traveling up and down and returning, we're going a little bit up and we're coming a little bit down, but we're always coming back to this baseline. Instead, it becomes much more rigid and it becomes much more um, like a yo-yo, where you're kind of shifting back and forth and you could become stuck on or stuck off. So hopefully you'll be able to look at this and recognize some of your clients in these experiences. And this is a really great, like, non-pathologizing way to look at our clients and their experiences. So, for example, someone who's stuck in a state of hyperarousal or sympathetic nervous system activation might show might have experiences like anxiety. They might be hypervigilant, unable to relax, settle down. The person that's like constantly, shaking their foot or constantly rubbing their fingers, all of those small little actions that let you know that there's a lack of kind of settled energy within their system. Digestive problems, emotional flooding, chronic pain. The reason for chronic pain, the connection with chronic pain, when our nervous system is bracing for a sympathetic nervous system response, when we are planning to either, our nervous system thinks that whatever the stressor is, it's preparing us to either fight or run away. And to do that, we need to have our muscles be relaxed. Well, when this nervous system dysregulation becomes so chronic within our system, then our muscles never actually learn to relax. And that constant state of bracing can lead to this chronic pain. So for clients who are unable to sleep, they're unable to regulate their anger, and it's just always rage, always, there's always hostility. That is an example of someone who is stuck in that hyper arousal zone. Now, it's also possible to be stuck in the hypoarousal or parasympathetic nervous system state. Now, that exhibits more so in like depression, exhaustion, dissociation. Anyone who's really lacking the ability to connect with their emotions, connect with their physicality, chronic fatigue. Those are all examples of what it might look like to be stuck in off. So if you have a parent who you are working with who has experienced trauma and they have a lot of nervous system dysregulation, which every single person who's experienced trauma for the most part has. Some of us may have more tools than others, but for the most part, this is there to some degree. So if they have this nervous system that is a little more jagged, a little more yo-yo like, where they're constantly switching between on and off or getting stuck in those places, never really able to exist in that place of baseline, then how is that going to impact their ability to parent? It's going to have huge impacts, right? They're not going to be able to show up for their kids because maybe they're too depressed. Maybe they're too anxious. Maybe that hypervigilance becomes intensified. Maybe they're just, back and forth and not able to provide healthy co-regulation to their kids. And children do not have the ability to regulate their own nervous systems, and they depend on the regulation of a trusted person near them, like a parent or caregiver. So when we don't have the ability to regulate our children, then it just leads to more and more stress. It becomes this like self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So the more dysregulated we are, the more dysregulated they become. And the more dysregulated they become, the more they might act out or, have attention-seeking behaviors to try to get their needs met. And we might be unable to see all of those as signs that we need to respond to. And instead, it just heightens our stress or our reactivity. So with this window of tolerance framework, the belief is that we can always work to widen the window. We just have to know how, and we have to have the right tools. So it doesn't mean that they'll always be stuck in this way of, in reactivity or in depression or in um, anxiety or a tendency towards rage. We just have to support them in widening the window. And unfortunately, that's not something that um, many mental health professionals get to spend much time doing. If you're busy with a really full caseload, and all you have time for is, you know, however many minutes of a check in or talk therapy, it's likely that you're not going to be working in bottom up healing techniques. And maybe some of you are, which is absolutely beautiful. Not I'm in no way making generalizations. I'm just talking more largely about how this is not necessarily something that's prioritized um, in education for mental health professionals, and something more so that a lot of people, find their way to on their own afterwards. But really, there's so much to be gained from having a knowledge and awareness of what it takes to widen the window and how we can start to use that, for ourselves, and really embody it. And then how do we share it with the individuals that we serve? So we are going to come back to this idea of widening the window of tolerance and talk more about how we do that. Um, but first, we're going to just continue a little bit more in terms of the conversation. So now that we have looked at kind of all of the factors that are impacting parents today and impacting their mental health, their ability to cope, their ability to respond versus react, now we can look at, well, how do we best support this population? So, first, it's helpful to look at what the barriers are so that we can think about how we remove them. So, as was mentioned in what you guys put in the chat earlier, um, things like potential legal involvement, or stigma, cultural norms, those are all things that can impact someone's feeling of comfort or willingness to seek help in the first place. Now, other things like lack of time, lack of support, lack of transportation, or childcare, those are all things that impact someone else's ability, even if they are willing, for example, to make that phone call. Well, how am I going to, make it to my appointments or engage in this program, for example, if I don't have anybody to watch my kids and my kids aren't welcome? So, and then finally, this belief that mother means martyr. And I think this is just important to know because it's a really so prevalent in our society that as parents, we are just supposed to be able to do it all. Can't tell you how many moms I've talked to. It's like, well, that's my job. Like, I'm just supposed to figure it out. And we know that there's no guidebook here. And parents are humans. So we do not have to sacrifice our own well being for the well being of our family. Rather, we should protect our own well being so that we can protect the well being of our family. So, to make support more easily available to mothers, we can consider things like um, the just simply having the awareness and the willingness to acknowledge the risks and the challenges, right? So being very, having open and honest conversations around, I understand that you might not feel safe or feel comfortable engaging in therapy with me because you're afraid of what that might mean for the custody battle that you're engaged in. It's just one example. So being willing to name those things up front and talk about how you being very transparent about how you will or will not be able to protect their privacy and what you can do to help them to feel safe enough to step into that. Creating family-friendly spaces, which it's so beautiful that Demas has so many programs where there are mothers can maintain with they can be together with their children, and that just makes it all the more possible. And we also know that for more like outpatient settings, things like that. Sometimes that can be a barrier. So for a parent to feel like, well, it's not possible for me to drag my 2-year-old along to my um, therapy session right now because I know that I would never want to bring my 2-year-old into that kind of a setting because chaos would just be chaos. So, how do we create spaces where parents can truly come in and receive the support that they need around, having a safe place where their kids can be engaged in something, for example, while they're engaged in their own wellness planning. Also having family friendly spaces in that, are there changing tables available? Are there private spaces for chest or breastfeeding? Um, you know, are there kids activities available for places where kids are welcome? Are there things that are actually going to entertain them? So it's possible for that parent to be able to focus. Virtual groups and services, meaning that parents do not have to even, it just cuts through some of those barriers, such as transportation, limits the amount of time that they have to commit to. And obviously, there's something really powerful about being together in person, and we're all trying to move, more back to that following COVID. But there's certainly something to be said for the ease of virtual appointments. So flexible programming, it is so very common and so very likely that things will come up. And that's not something, of course, that we want people to take advantage of and just be, canceling or dropping out or disengaging and using this as an excuse. And a lot of parents will not commit to ongoing things such as, committing. I just can't commit to an 8-week program, for example, because I just don't know that I'll always have childcare, or I just don't know that my kid won't get sick, or I just don't know, how it'll be. So a certain amount of flexibility just provides that little bit of comfort that can make it feel achievable. So in-home services, certainly bringing the help there is, oops, didn't mean to do that, is really helpful because that's where, in-home care just kind of cuts through the barrier of transportation and all of that. But also, I mentioned continuation of care here because there's what happens in the office, and that's great and really, really important. Or there's what happens like in the treatment program. And it's almost like everything almost goes out the window, not completely. I don't want to say that to be pessimistic, but when you get home, right? So what does it look like when you get home? How are you actually going to implement the tools that you've been learning at home? How are you going to continue to stay clean when you're at home? How are you going to deal with your, staying calm amidst your toddler's meltdown when you're at home? It's really easy to practice when we're in the presence of other people, when we're in different environments, but how can we make it so that there's this carryover? So for doulaing, for birth doula and postpartum doula work, there's this emphasis on supporting with PI. So practical support, informational support, and emotional support. And this can be a really helpful framework for looking at the needs of parents. So obviously some of this is not things that you personally are ever going to attend to. I don't imagine any of you are going to go into your client's home and start doing their laundry. However, these are the things that are relevant. So for example, a new mother who feels like they're drowning is also still trying to take care of their older children, is also trying to get a nap so they don't feel like they lose their mind, but who's going to watch baby and who's going to watch toddler? They still have to put food on the table. There's laundry that's piled up. So while you might not be the person to provide this, you can be the person who helps them to think about how they will receive support around these things. So for example, do you have anyone who can come over and hold your baby for, a short period of time so that you can actually take a nap? Because I feel like sleep would be really helpful for you right now. So we'll talk more about resources for being able to connect people when they don't have any support, because some people don't. So informational support, just simply having the knowledge of what's happening and the obstacles that they're facing, the milestones that they're going through, knowledge of childhood development, and awareness of supportive resources. So that every time that somebody says, like, I just feel like I'm the worst mom ever. My baby cries like every time that they see me, and it just makes me feel like a piece of shit. I don't even feel like I should be doing this right now. You can talk about, well, what's normal for a baby to be doing at the age, the age and stage of development that their child is at. So having awareness around that, or being able to, send resources to support them with information, those are, it's just good to have the awareness and be able to connect them, even if you're not the person that has the answers to the questions. Maybe you can connect them with someone else. I love that somebody just put in the chat that you helped them do their laundry, wash their dishes, and clean. It's so beautiful, because like that is just, these are the everyday things that can overwhelm someone's ability to cope, and just feel like, the pressure is mounting. And so yeah, sometimes those are the things that can make a world of difference. And then finally, emotional support, which all of you are obviously very well versed in. And that is, the third and most important piece, is just the ability to listen, to validate. And if you, again, don't have the answers, you don't have exactly what they need, because maybe they need to just connect with other mothers who know what it's like to be where they are. Then you can connect them with a peer support group, or you can connect them with some kind of a perinatal mental health professional, right? So if that is, if you provide support in another way, but you feel like, they just really need to connect one-on-one with a therapist who, this is really 100% what they do, then you can make referrals as needed. And so with all of these pieces, the practical, the informational, and the emotional support, there's pieces that you can provide, and then there's likely things that you won't provide yourself. And it's really about having a really full resource list to be able to connect people with. So I'm just would love, again, for everybody to put in the chat, just what are resources that are relevant for parents who are struggling. And the list is long, and it can go on and on. But we can think, I think, very easily around mental health resources, which is a beautiful thing. And we can connect people to, psychiatrist or therapist, or a group that will be supportive, or a treatment program. And that's all beautiful. And like we're talking about, like, if they don't have somebody to come do their laundry, then like, who can we, connect them with? It might actually come and do their laundry. So the resources, you have to think outside of the box a little bit, because some of the challenges are, they stretch beyond, the impact, they impact mental health, but they're not necessarily within the realm of what is provided. Reach, absolutely. Amazing program. Psychology Today. Yes. PSI, national and local support groups, and provider directory, and the maternal mental health hotline. Yes. The provider directory absolutely is really great, because, for individuals who are, needing to set themselves up with providers once they're exiting your program, for example, and they need to work with a provider on their own who is really well versed in maternal mental health, you want to make sure that you're connecting them with someone, the right kind of someone. 211. Yes, free storytime play groups at the library. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. What are like family friendly activities that are in their area, so that they're not just, maybe stuck in their apartment every day, and it's not something they have to pay for, something that's local and maybe they could take the bus to, but it's something where they can get socialization, their kids can get socialization. Yeah. Mommy and me groups. Absolutely. Yeah. The Proud program, of course. Thank you, Rose. The Proud program is so good. So I'm going to run through some of these resources quickly, and these are, again, probably ones that you are all familiar with, but there's a couple that I really like to point out, because there's just some amazing work happening in our state, which is just so, so cool. So I obviously have here the DAMAS Women and Children Recovery Programs, and it's just, we're really fortunate in our state that we have all of you doing this amazing work. But in addition, we have some really cool things like what's happening at the Yukon Parenting Program. We have, the Hispanic Health Council, has a really wonderful um, peer support program. And I think I'll talk about this on a different slide, but that's mother to mother to support healthy breastfeeding, getting breastfeeding off to a good start right away. Planned Parenthood, Head Start programs, Connecticut Office of Early Childhood, Birth to Three, obviously things like domestic violence services, lactation consultants. It can also be like psychiatrists who know how to work with parents and know how to navigate, what medications are appropriate to take when you're breast or chest feeding. Another one that I like to point out is doula services. Obviously, I'm a doula, so I'm a little bit biased, but there's been lots of research to show that having the support of a doula can improve outcomes, and particularly around like reducing unnecessary interventions in the hospital during birth. So there is a program here in Connecticut based out of Hamden, not far from the Women's Consortium, called Empowered Beginnings. And they have for-profit doula services that are available for anybody who can afford them, but then they also offer a certain number of scholarships every year to families in need. And some of that is based off of mental health, past mental health issues. Some of that is based off of wanting to support BIPOC individuals. But then they also have a program that is in York, where they provide a doula to any birthing person in York who wants to have an empowered and supported birth, even while incarcerated. So some of these things are just really just give me chills to think about, because it's just really amazing how much we have here in this state. In addition, we have Birth Support Education and Beyond, which is an amazing, amazing program. And so they provide birth and postpartum support for families. They have specific grants, so they provide support to Yaz individuals, anyone who's involved in Demas Yaz services, as well as to, I think, certain age groups like teen moms and more. Their website's just amazing. So it's just great to know that we have so much that we can connect folks to. So even individuals coming to us who could never in a million years afford to pay out of pocket to get doula support, or postpartum doula support, like having somebody there who's going to help to educate them on what their baby's going through and also help them fold the baby laundry, right? Like we talk about laundry. So that is possible. It is possible to get connected with support and people who can provide that kind of help, even without having the financial means. So, and Connecticut Office of Early Childhood is able to help in some situations around that as well. So, so many great resources, and I'm sure you guys have many more. There's a couple of links that have been put in the chat, which is great. So let's see. I want to talk a little bit about peer support, as hopefully all of us are aware at this point. Peer support is a hugely beneficial piece of mental health care, and it has been proven in all kinds of different groups and populations to be supportive. So the top one is related to mothers. The rest of them aren't. It's really just to show that all around peer support is really helpful in supporting individuals who are struggling with mental health. So it decreases mild depressive symptoms in new mothers, and that was phone-based peer support, increases engagement and care, and reduces substance use. For adults, both with mental health and addiction challenges, reduces psychiatric inpatient admissions, enhances military veteran engagement with mental health services, increases mental well-being for students with depression. So there's examples from all different areas, right? We've got substance abuse, we've got students, we've got veterans, we've got mothers, and all of them are finding benefit from connecting with someone who has been where they are. So supporting moms is no different, and having peer support resources as part of your resource list is hugely, hugely important. So some of those are around chest and breastfeeding that I mentioned. The Hispanic Health Council peer counselors are all mothers who have been on their own journey around breast or chest feeding. The WIC peer counselors, La Leche League and Breastfeeding USA, all of these are free services that are available in many, many communities across the state, some virtual, some in person, where you can go and connect. And those, again, are specifically around feeding. Postpartum Support International and Postpartum Support International, the Connecticut chapter, huge resources. And I'm sure all of you know that already, but they have such a wide range of offerings in terms of very specific things, like, parents of kids who have disabilities, or parents who have gone through postpartum psychosis, very specific and also more broad offerings as well. So local groups, there's a lot of parenting groups that just kind of pop up. It could be like, at a local library. Online mom groups, there's a lot of really nice, beautiful support that happens in those. I mean, there's obviously like some negative things that can happen there too, but these are the places that just good to be aware of. These are the places that a lot of our clients are going to be going to, asking for support or advice. At 11 o'clock at night, they're going to be putting something in a Facebook chat for an online mom group, right? Instead of reaching out to you. So being aware of what's out there, and maybe some that are better than others. Advocacy Unlimited and CCAR being, the two biggest peer support organizations in the state, and then the Proud and Reach programs, and then Hope After Loss, which is, anyone who has experienced pregnancy or infant loss. They have a lot of groups and a lot of, really beautiful offerings. So I want to come back to this idea of widening the window and how we can support our clients in doing that. So what actually does help us to widen the window of tolerance? Well, practicing interoceptive awareness, noticing, or mindfulness. So mindfulness, I really just dislike that word altogether because I feel like it's become such a buzzword that people don't even know what it means anymore. It can also feel very overwhelming. Like, you just have to be mindful. Well, what does that even mean? So interoceptive awareness speaks to the ability to actually feel what's going on inside of our bodies. Now, if you've experienced trauma, then likely your ability to actually feel sensory input from your physical body is diminished as a form of protection. So it's actually an ability or a skill. It's like a muscle that we have to strengthen. So the, little exercise that we did at the beginning, where we just kind of checked in to see what was happening in each part of the body, really short, sweet, and simple, done repeatedly over time, helps to build interoceptive awareness. And that is one of the most beneficial pieces for widening the window, because when I was using the example before of someone cutting you off in traffic, if you're not able to feel your internal signals that are telling you that you're shifting towards intense rage, you're just going to be there before you know it, and you won't be able to back yourself out of it. However, if you're able to sense into your body and say, whoa, I feel this intense heat rising in my chest, or wow, all of a sudden my jaw is clenched, or my fists, my hands are in fists, then you're going to notice like, oh, something's happening, and what can I do about it? It gives you the opportunity to actually intercept and choose to respond instead of react. Now, if we have zero interoceptive awareness, then we will not be able to insert the pause needed to respond instead of react, because before we know it, we're already there. So connecting with others, spending time in really safe and supportive, healthy relationships can help us to widen the window. Reducing stress, which, may seem just like ironic, and maybe a little difficult for, folks in what they're going through in their lives. So maybe that's not the advice that you're going to give, like, just reduce your stress, because that's not going to be so helpful. But yes, if you just in general reduce the amount of stress that's in your life, if you have the ability to do that, that will help to widen the window. In general, living a healthy lifestyle by eating well, getting exercise, and improving your sleep habits. Again, telling someone to like try to get more sleep when they have a newborn or, even a 1-year-old at home is not necessarily going to be helpful advice, but it's helpful to know that that they can still, take action to improve the health of their nervous system and to widen their window of tolerance by, practicing interoceptive awareness or getting out for a short walk, pushing the baby in a stroller. Those are going to be things that they can actually choose to take um, power over to do something about. So, utilizing skills to help increase capacity for discomfort. So, when we don't have any capacity to be with discomfort, then we quickly shift out of our window of tolerance. So, for example, if I have a really hard time dealing with grief and feelings of grief, every time I touch into that grief that's sitting there because I've lost, my child, um, then that grief is going to overwhelm me and it's going to immediately push me out of my window of tolerance. Likely, it's going to push me down into a state of disconnection or depression. Now, if I have a coach or, a therapist or a supportive person in my life who is teaching me tools to stay with that discomfort and just be with a little bit of it at a time, slowly, slowly, slowly expanding my capacity to be with it, then it means that when that comes up, which it inevitably will, it's not going to immediately throw me out of my window. So tools like just self-compassion, taking in, just a little like 2% of that discomfort at a time, things like that, putting a hand there when you feel it, things like that, and being able to explore that in a safe place, whether that's, while you're in treatment or in a group setting or in therapy, that is hugely helpful over time. And then practicing upregulating and downregulating activities as needed. So what I mean by that is when you go up into that upper part of the window, there's too much energy. When you go down, there's not enough energy. So the rule kind of is that we can bring in the opposite to help us balance. So, for example, if you're way up here, you need to be brought down a little bit. So, if you have a client who you can tell is like way up here in a state of rage, then trying to bring them down, way down too fast into like, well, let's just breathe together. Not going to be helpful. But if you're like, you know what, let's go. Let's go for a real quick walk around the building. Let's get some of this energy moving. We need to discharge some of this energy. We have too much energy. We need to bring it down. We need to release some of it. So I can tell you are so worked up right now. That's totally fine. You have every right to be. Let's keep talking about this. But while we talk, let's just walk. Let's just get some of this out. Maybe shake out your hands a little bit while you walk, or maybe, just like kick your feet or, whatever feels good. So we can just start to move some of this out. Now, the opposite might be true of, somebody who's a little bit down low on the opposite end of the spectrum. They are lacking energy. So we need to bring energy into the system. So using tools like tapping or self-massage, you're actually like bringing their physicality back online when they become disconnected to it. So that is something that is there and can be really helpful when you're working with it as needed. So we're going to touch upon bottom-up healing, which kind of goes along with this idea of widening the window. So bottom-up healing is a term that's used to talk about any kind of healing that is body-based. So we're not trying to fix the mind to fix the body. We're not trying to fix the mind to fix all the problems. We are working with the body to shift the nervous system. And so the reason for that there's a number of reasons for that. So the logical mind goes offline during the stress response. So when we've exited our window of tolerance, our logical mind is likely offline. We're no longer thinking with our brain and making rational decisions. We are not weighing the pros and the cons. We're just acting. We're just reacting. And so it doesn't make sense to work with the mind when the mind is gone rogue, right? So working with the body is the more beneficial choice. 80 to 90% of vagus nerve fibers are carrying messages from the body to the brain, not the other way around. So what that means is that our brain is constantly being informed by all of these vagus nerve fibers, this huge, huge nerve that goes throughout the whole body. It is constantly being informed about what's happening in the body. So if the body is in a constant state of stress or anxiety or tension or tightness, then our brain is going to be in the same state. If our muscles are always tense because we can't figure out how to relax and we're never doing anything to help our bodies relax, then our brain is going to constantly think that something is wrong. The body also holds memories of chronic and traumatic stress. So it just makes sense to work with the body to bring healing. So some examples of practices that you can use include breath work, movement, mindfulness, and again, interoceptive awareness exercises. Again, that's just noticing. It's a big word for noticing what's going on inside of you. And to work effectively with the nervous system, it's important to use tools that attune to our nervous system, right? So like not every tool is going to fit the person, and that's okay. So use ones that feel okay to you. Be consistent about it. Try to do it regularly. Use it in the heat of the moment, like when you've already you're out of your window of tolerance, find some tools and use them. And then also use them when you're feeling calm. That is what's going to bring changes over time to widen the window and increase your capacity for regulation. When you are more regulated, you can be more regulated for your family. It really just impacts the way you move through the world and all of your relationships and your experiences. So if you yourself are like, well, I don't know anything about this stuff and I am not going to be the one to, help them with any of this, that is absolutely okay. We also have some really great and affordable resources here in the state. So the first one being Toivo, which is located in Hartford, but they also travel and do bring, classes to mental health facilities. And their focus is on holistic support. So all of those the bottom up tools that I talked about, like mindful movement and breath work, Toivo can provide those. Free Center has a location in Hartford and in Middletown. Their offerings are free. Most of their offerings are free. And they have a lot of kind of holistic offerings as well. The Phoenix is a community activities for individuals who have at least, I believe, 48 hours of sobriety. But so they will offer things like sound healing. They have like some yoga classes. And again, it's a recovery community, but we're working on, bottom up healing. Mindful.org and Do Yoga With Me are things that, folks can tap into from home that are free. So when you expose parents to these practices that they can use alone or with their families to mitigate stress, then they become, familiar with them, and hopefully, the more that we use them, the more that we talk about them, the more they will feel encouraged to work with them on their own when they are not in our presence. And then there's ways that we can just bring this into our work with them, no matter what our work looks like. Like, whoa, I'm noticing that this person that I'm working with is really, really activated right now. Like, maybe we could just like pause and stop maybe talking about this thing because it just seems to make them more activated, and we could just breathe and notice what's happening. And we could like do that together, right? Doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to be a yoga teacher to lead it, just very simple. So bringing mindfulness or noticing into the conversation, like, wow, like that sounds so difficult. That sounds so difficult to go through. As you talk about that, I'm just wondering, like, what are you feeling in your body? Again, it doesn't have to be complicated. So observing, using this window of tolerance framework to observe where they're at and maybe using that to help you try to bring in some balance for them. And then encouraging, good self-care, which again, self-care, I think is just this terrible word, especially for parents, because it's like, yeah, you want me to take care of myself? When am I going to do that? Right? I've got all these kids running around. I've got work. I've got school. I've got people's plates are so full. But instead just talk about it more in the sense of like, what is it? What's one tiny 1 minute thing that you can do that is just for you today? How can you find some support so that you can make that happen? So I wanted to do one more experience to close, and I'm going to make it very, very brief so that I can save some time for questions if anybody has questions. So we're just going to round things out with one quick little experience. So again, invitation, no force, This is entirely up to you. So if you want to close your eyes, you can close your eyes. If you'd like to keep them open, maybe find something pleasant to look at. And again, just noticing the time that's passed, noticing what you've heard, and feel into what's happening in your body right now. How is it different than what was there when we started? And then see if you can locate one place within yourself that feels good. And if good is not available, okay, or less bad than somewhere else. And if you feel like you can't find that, then maybe something that feels neutral or something outside of yourself that you can turn to. So, for example, maybe you don't feel like anywhere in your body feels okay right now, but it feels okay to feel the texture of your sweater on your skin. And see if you can just let yourself be with that place for a moment, feeling that as an internal resource, like a tiny little island of safety within the body. Knowing that no matter what comes up, no matter what other uncomfortable experiences or sensations arise, there will always be at least one tiny little place, even if it's just your left pinky finger. Knowing that you can come back to that over and over again. Once again, feeling the support of the surface beneath you, allowing yourself to be supported. And then taking a nice big breath in and a long breath out. And opening your eyes when you're ready.
Well, thank you again for joining us this morning. Our next speaker is Rebecca Allen. Rebecca grew up in Eastern Connecticut and has worked in the behavioral health field for over 23 years. She received her undergraduate degree from Eastern Connecticut State University and a master's in public health from the University of Connecticut. Rebecca works as a director of recovery advocacy for the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery, or CCAR, as you guys probably are more familiar with. CCAR provides peer-based recovery support services to people with alcohol and or other drug addictions. CCAR also strives to remove the stigma that surrounds addiction and recovery through advocacy, education, service, and by, quote, putting a face on recovery, close quote. Rebecca, good morning. I hope I did your bio justice. Welcome and thank you
Hi,
for joining WSPIC.
good morning. Thank you so much, Sheila, and thank you for the invitation to talk to the group this morning and talk a little bit about CCAR and what we do. So I'm going to share my screen. My name is Rebecca Allen. I work as the Director of Recovery Advocacy for CCAR. And I am a woman in recovery. And what that means to me is it's been over 26 years since the last time I used heroin. I share this with the hope that by doing so can not only inspire others, but also remove some of that stigma and discrimination that people face when they're in recovery. So I always like to start talking a little bit about our vision and mission, because this is really woven into so much of what we do. So the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery envisions a world where the power, hope, and healing of recovery from alcohol and other addictions is thoroughly understood and embraced. And we have a twofold mission. The first is to put a face on recovery, and we do so by speaking out and offering ourselves as living examples that recovery is possible and recovery is real. And we also provide recovery support services, which I'm going to talk a little bit about later on, and promote recovery from alcohol and other addictions through advocacy, education, and service. I also want to talk about our foundational principles because, again, these are also woven into a lot of what we do. So first and foremost, recovery first. So before, before my organization, what I do, I'm always talking about recovery, and I'm always advocating for people in recovery, and that is, beyond CCAR. And we define the recovery community as individuals in recovery or seeking recovery, family, friends, and allies. So it really encompasses, a large group, a community. Another foundational principle is you're in recovery if you say you are. So when you walk into one of our recovery community centers, we're not asking you questions around your sobriety or things like that. The big question that we ask is, how can we help you with your recovery today? We believe that there's many pathways to recovery, so multiple pathways, which I do have a slide on a little bit later on. We focus on the recovery potential, not the pathology, and we err on the side of the recovery. The recovery is what we call people that are in recovery or seeking recovery. So we don't call people clients or consumers. We use more of a welcoming language, and we call them recoveries. And we also err on the side of being generous. So I do want to talk about first our recovery community centers. So we just celebrated our first center that we opened in Willimantic being open for 20 years. And we celebrated that on February 20th. So that was a really great accomplishment. And, it really rose out of, at the time, the Hartford Courant had done a series of articles talking about Willimantic and naming it the heroin capital or heroin town. And we knew that wasn't true. And me personally, I grew up in Columbia, which is a little suburb outside of Willimantic. And, although I was, I was actively using in Willimantic, but that is also where I found my recovery as well. So really, we decided to open our first recovery community center in Willimantic to kind of counteract that stigma that the town had and still has somewhat. But we went on to open recovery centers in Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven, and Waterbury, and our newest one in Torrington opened on February 1st. We are going to be opening 2 more, one in Danbury next week, as a matter of fact, and one in New London, tentative May 1st. So these are really great physical locations, and which brings me to my next slide. So recovery community centers are recovery-oriented sanctuaries anchored in the heart of the community. So we really try to, when we're looking at locations to open one of these, we really want to be in, the central area, because part of what it is to kind of promote recovery. So we don't want to be, in church basements, or, we don't want to be in the back of the building or things like that. We want to be on Main Street. We want to be able to be seen and be a place that is promoting recovery and all of the great things that recovery can bring to a community. Recovery community centers support the many pathways of recovery. They serve as hubs offering a variety of recovery support services, and they give people an opportunity to give back. So one of the things that is different about recovery is that many people, when they find their recovery, they have a desire to give back to others. So our recovery community centers offer people the opportunity to volunteer and to give back to others, which was freely given to them. Recovery community centers, it's not just people in recovery or people seeking recovery, but also it's a place for family members, friends, and allies. One of the really great things that has happened, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, is we've built some really great relationships with our local colleges and universities. So we do get interns that come and volunteer at our centers as part of their schooling, but it really gives them an opportunity to interact directly, with people in recovery or people seeking recovery. But also, there's not too many people that haven't been touched in some way by addiction, whether it's somebody in their family or a close friend. So it also allows them to see that, people do recover, people do get better, people do, improve their health and wellness, and be able to be a contributing member of their communities. And again, I mentioned earlier that one of the big things is, how can we help you with your recovery today? We're not focused on the past. We're not focused on the future. We're really looking at, what can we do today to help? Some of the recovery support services that we offer, we have peer-run all recovery meetings. So an all recovery meeting is a very inclusive format where people aren't introducing themselves as, hi, I'm Rebecca, I'm an alcoholic or whatever. They're really, you can introduce yourself however you want. These all recovery meetings aren't associated with a 12-step program or anything else like that. They're very inclusive, and it's something that we've been doing since the beginning. We also offer support groups, that are specifically for women, specifically for men, young people, Spanish. So we have many bilingual staff. We try to offer most of our services in English and Spanish. LGBTQ support meetings. We have smart recovery meetings and Wellbriety. So Wellbriety is a Native American focused support group. And we do different types of trainings around recovery and advocacy. So part of what I do for CCAR is I go to our centers and I talk to our volunteers and our participants about how to be an advocate, how to use your voice to help others. And it's a really great, I'm privileged to see how people really start to find their voice and to really, own that space and to give back to others by doing so. We talk a lot about recovery-friendly language. So, we move away from the language of substance abuse, and we use the language around, substance use disorders, or that person-first language. We do different types of, journaling, yoga, arts and crafts. We work very closely with the Phoenix, who our previous presenter was talking about. We do things with gardening, crocheting. We really use a participatory process in the centers where a lot of our our calendar is really created by the people that are engaged in the center. So we do a lot of community meetings, and most of our groups are run by our participants. They're also a place where you can get involved with the larger recovery community. You can build a support system, and also they're great to connect to those local community resources. So, our centers are usually just run by 2 staff persons, but they are the experts when it comes to their local community and finding those resources and being able to link people directly with those resources. Another recovery support service that we've been doing for a number of years is telephone recovery support, as well as recovery coaching. And I will talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And in the last year, we've really started to expand our services that are directed towards young people and families. So a little bit more about telephone recovery support. This is a program that we've been doing since 2005. So we've done, we're going on almost 20 years of this particular program as well. And we call because we care. So what it is people will sign up, and they can do it in a variety of ways. So they can go to our website, and there is a web form that they can fill out. We also work directly with many treatment providers, and we we give them either a physical sheet, or we send them a link where they can help people sign up to receive these calls. And they're just a weekly call. We call you, right? You don't have to call us, we call you. And they are made by trained volunteers. And it's really just to check in on people, ask how they're doing, ask, if they need any support. A lot of it is offering encouragement. Many times people can be isolated and not have others to talk to. So many times this volunteer that is calling can be the only person that really is that person has to support them. So providing that support and providing that encouragement, and also information about resources. So I always talk about this program as a win-win, because not only are we giving support to somebody that may be new to recovery, but it also is a great program for the volunteer that's making this call. It gives them the satisfaction of being able to give back and helping that other person. For the providers, this is something that is outside of the treatment arena. And it's really just another additional resource to help people connect with the larger recovery community. A little bit about recovery coaching. So again, the previous presentation talked about some of the research around peers. And, it shows that trained peers with shared experiences have a higher success rate at engaging individuals in need of help. Recovery coaches work with people affected by substance use disorders or co-occurring disorders. They don't diagnose or treat addiction. So a recovery coach isn't going to, do an assessment or things like that. They really focus on the future. They don't explore, past feelings or trauma. That is something that is for a clinical or a clinician. They help with decision making and recovery plans. And again, looking at things that will, help people and taking things one step at a time. They also provide support in following through with some of these goals. And they are very knowledgeable about those multiple pathways of recovery, as well as local resources. Before I get into some of the multiple pathways of recovery, so CCAR started the recovery coach training in 2008, and probably a couple of months ago, we just reached a milestone, which was that the training has been used to train over 100,000 coaches. And this is a national training and even an international training. So again, the importance of that peer-to-peer support is invaluable. So a little bit about the multiple pathways of recovery. So most people are aware of the 12 steps, AANA-CA, which stands for Cocaine Anonymous, Adult Children of Alcoholics, and Dual Recovery Anonymous. But there's also so many other different pathways and supports for people. There are some religious support groups, such as Celebrate Recovery, which is offered at some churches. And in Connecticut, it's very popular down south, but it's also, there's many Celebrate Recovery groups in Connecticut as well. There's the spiritual pathways, such as Dharma Recovery, which was known as Refuge Recovery, Wellbriety, which is based on Native American principles. There's the secular types of support, so things like Life Ring and Smart Recovery. Medications for opioid use disorders, so things like methadone, Suboxone, Vivitrol. Those are all types of pathways of recovery, different wellness-based, so yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, anything like that that can, provide that holistic support to people that can help them stay on that path of recovery, whatever works for somebody. One size doesn't fit all. Active sober communities. So, I love the Phoenix. The Phoenix is a wonderful organization. And, like I said, they are very connected to our centers. They do things, with yoga, of course, and sound healing, but they also do things like we started a cornhole tournament, so we have things like that can make recovery fun. One of the things that people worry about, especially in the beginning, is, oh, well, they're so used to using their whatever substance as part of like their social activities and their social group. So when they give that up, a lot of people feel that, well, how am I going to have fun? So this is a way to show people that you can have fun in recovery. That recovery doesn't have to be boring. And some of the online recovery supports. So In the Rooms is a website that offers different support groups, AA, as well as like all recovery meetings and smart recovery. There's the Phoenix app, and there's different groups on Reddit or things like the Sober Grid or 24 hours a day. So a little bit about our coach programs. So we have volunteer recovery coaches that are in all of our centers, as well as our staff. So I've been with the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery for a little over 11 years. And when I started, there were 13 staff members. Now we are up to 75 staff members. And most of that growth has happened in the last probably 6 to 7 years. So we are rapidly growing, but we are all trained as recovery coach professionals. So, our staff, as well as we have volunteers that have gone through our recovery coach trainings that are in our recovery community centers. But we have, other coach programs that are staff, paid staff. And one is the emergency department. So this is a dispatch model. Our coaches are dispatched to all of the Connecticut hospitals, 31, and we do respond to 2 satellite locations. I believe one is in Groton, the Pequot Center, as well as the other one is in Plainfield, Connecticut. But the coaches are available at all 31 Connecticut emergency departments. They work closely with the medical staff and also substance use disorder treatment providers. They're on call from 8 a.m. until midnight, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So that is a huge program for us. And they also follow up with people. So, the coaches are supposed to follow up at least 6 times in the first 10 days, but really they follow up as long as that person wants them to, So many of our coaches have been working with people for multiple years. Another coach program we have that is relatively new is we do have coaches working within the Department of Corrections as well as parole. So at York, we have a recovery coach that is working within their therapeutic community, as well as coaches that are supporting some of the ladies that are getting released. Which is just phenomenal. A lot of times, especially when you are leaving a correctional facility and trying to, re-enter, right? You have all of these challenges, and especially if you are a mother you know, your challenges are even greater. So having a coach that can work with you both before you leave as well as after you leave has been a really great partnership with the Department of Corrections. You know, again, it's a relatively new program, and unfortunately, we kind of launched it right when COVID hit. So it took us a little bit to actually, you know, get into the facilities, but we've been there. You know, we've been inside now for at least the last 2 years, and have really been able to build those bridges and really provide that support to the women as well as the men. And our last program is we have started to work with some of the jail diversion staff at the Waterbury, Bridgeport, and Hartford courthouses. And really, it's just another layer of support for people. You know, our coaches are able to, you know, really offer the full menu of resources to people. You know, our coaches aren't connected to a particular treatment provider, so they're really able to, you know, really work with that person and find out what that person wants to do. We really believe that, you know, that individual is the best resource of what's going to work the best for them. And our coaches are, you know, trained in motivational interviewing and really, you know, helping people figure out what the best recovery plan is going to look like for them. And my last slide is just a little bit about our recovery events coming up in Connecticut. So our recovery walks. So this is a, you know, an event that we've been doing since 2001. And we do it at Bushnell Park in Hartford, Connecticut. And we say that we do it in the shadow of the Capitol because, you know, that is where decisions are being made and things like that affect people in recovery. So that is really an event where we celebrate recovery and we are putting a face on recovery. And also our Multiple Pathways of Recovery conference. So we started it in 2016. We started in Mystic, Connecticut. We've done it in Florida for a number of years, as well as Colorado and Iowa. But we are bringing it back to Connecticut this year. It will be in New Haven in August. And it's just a great way to, you know, interact with others in recovery. You know, recovery leaders from all over the United States come. There's different workshops, you know, things like that. So it's not your typical conference, you know. That's what I'll say about that.